Much, John. Whoa. Yeah, I better press got it on the button, hadn't I? Okay, cool. Right, hello everyone. So we are back with Sarah. Sarah's changed her name since she was last here, so Sarah Winters now. Although I'm going to shame you here, Sarah, that Sarah had spelled her surname wrong before she came in and had it as Sarah Winter, and I was like, I'm sure it's Winter, but yeah. So yeah. But the rest of the session will be much more prepared than that, won't it? Yes. So we're going to be talking about the Readability Guidelines project today, which I think is really exciting and lots of you are interested in because we've had 200 sign-ups for today, so clearly lots of people are interested in that. So you can get we'll put the link in the chat where you can get the site, so the Readability Guidelines project, which is a global collaborative effort to show people how simple content changes can help people access web content. And that's around, and Sarah will cover this stuff around cognitive and physical challenges, but also people who are stressed and anxious, or people who are time pressured, but anyone who's accessing your content. And I think particularly for the types of content that we have in the charity sector, that those readability guidelines are really, really useful. You can also read Sarah's book, Content Design, which you can get on her website, which is contentdesign.london, I think, isn't it, Sarah? Yeah, cool. Which is the book that I always recommend if you're new to content design, or you're an existing content designer and you want to apply some common, usable, simple principles. That's the book. There we go. Look, Maddie's holding it up. Still the one that I recommend to charities. It's also a good cop-out for me, like when I'm working with a website client and they're like, what about content? And I'm like, I'll just recommend a book and you can just go and read that and you can just deal with that yourself. So that's generally my approach. So if you ever hire a third sector lab to build a website, that'll be the conversation we have by Sarah's book. Right, okay. Will we get cracking?
Yep, happy?
Yeah. Sarah, just as a disclosure as well, Sarah has people chopping down trees next to her house. Get anything disastrous, that's what's happened.
Yeah, if one falls on me, then
Yeah.
there will be much screaming, and from the cat. Okay, so morning everybody. Lovely to see you. I thought that we would go through a little bit of background on what the Readability Guidelines is and where we're going with it. And then I have some questions for you, because I would quite like us as an industry to come up with some answers rather than one person jumping up and down and flapping their arms and then everybody falling in line. So, Readability Guidelines, and the wiki is started from me and about 15 people just having a look at where the usability evidence is for a lot of our style decisions. So what I was seeing on Twitter and LinkedIn was loads of people going, I'm creating a style guide, I'm creating a style guide. And I was kind of thinking, do you know what? Most of those decisions are based in usability. They're based in accessibility and they're based in inclusivity. So why are you all spending months and months coming up with all these different style guides? Right, I don't know about any of you. I'm a lot older than a lot of you, but we always used to go with either The Economist or The Guardian or whatever the style guide was. You just picked up somebody else's and used it. Suddenly this wasn't a thing. Everybody was making their own. And I was like, why are you spending stacks of time on this? And so I asked the question on social media, as you do, and the answer was, well, the evidence isn't there. We have so many arguments with our stakeholders about style that we end up having loads of nuanced stuff sitting off the back. So we might use, for example, The Economist guide as the main, but then we have all these kind of like but moments afterwards. And I was like, no, we've all sat in enough research now to sit there and say, no, there is pretty much one way that you can do this if it's going to be accessible, if it's going to be inclusive. And at the moment, because of course this stuff changes, right? Every 10 years, we all change, whatever. So that's where it started from. So there was just me and a few people. We met the Deliveroo offices and we had a chat and we all went out and we, hammered Google Scholar and came back with all the evidence. The one rule was that nothing would go into the readability guidelines unless there was evidence for it. So we've all got wants and needs and personal hates, right? But that's not good enough. There has to be evidence for it. Now, some of the evidence is quite old. Some of this evidence is from the 70s, particularly with racist language, actually. It's a brilliant book, comes from the 70s, could literally have been written yesterday for the relevance that it still has. So in some instances, our language moves on very quickly. And in other instances, it stays still for decades. And the skill is working out which is which. So then we hired Lizzie Bruce, who's on Twitter as Kate Content, and she created this kind of mess of, I don't know, we should get some usability evidence and pop it together. And the site that you see now, this book, everything comes from Lizzie. Now it's broken down into like a summary at the beginning. I'm just going to show, I'm not going to do share screens and things because it goes wrong. So you can see the summary at the top, and it's like, so in this instance, abbreviations and acronyms, the following helps people in a hurry, people who are stressed, multitasking, impairments, visual impairments, that sort of thing. You have ADHD on the autism spectrum. We will pull those sorts of things out so that you can see why you're doing the things that you're doing, because you're probably doing them naturally. To be brutally honest, you're probably going, yeah, no, I would never have a sentence that's longer than 25 words long because it looks wrong. That's what loads of people do. But when you're having an argument, particularly with an academic, for example, who wants 72-word long sentences, or a CEO of a charity who does very well on what they're doing and fundraising and being the focal point for your charity, but probably shouldn't be messing around in blog posts. Having arguments with them or having discussions with them or friendly even chats with them, just saying that looks wrong doesn't fly. And most of what you and your gut says that's not wrong has evidence behind it, not everything, but we will come to that at the end. So everything in the guidelines was meant to help us have those conversations, because most of our job isn't technical. Most of our job is not spelling and coming up with the right sentences and coming up with the right words. I don't know about you. Most of my job is arguing with people about why they should be doing the things that they should be doing. So in the book, it's not linked, obviously. Everything that's in the book is on the wiki. That is all linked to the research. Some of it is behind paywalls. We did try to get hold of it for free, but the academics sell it to publication houses, and then the publication houses say no. So for some of it, you need cash, but not all of it. And certainly, you know, 2/3 of it is open. But you can trust that everything that is in here is tested somewhere, empirical kind of research, not like, I don't know, the Beef Council did some research into how fabulous beef is. It's not like that. It's actual empirical research. So some of the things in here are going to be obvious to you. For example, 15-word sentences are comprehended by 90% of people with a Western education who do not have cognitive or behavioural challenges that will interrupt their reading flow. 25 is an average. Anything over that and you start losing people. It's common, we know that, right? Even if you use the correct punctuation. Longest sentence in a British book is 72 words long, which is why I use that example a lot, and is the Oliver Twist book. But we kind of don't do that now. So these ones are obvious, but this is where I come into the questions for you. How do you feel about testing? Do you test your content with, for example, neurodivergent people? If you have ADHD, for example, remember all of these things that I'm going to talk about, they are a scale. And so you have to understand that we need to hit where we think we're going to be on that scale, but it won't cover it. Nothing will cover everybody, is what I'm telling you. The way to get around that is to really know your audience, know your channels, and know where you are giving your information. But back to ADHD then, as an example, right? Some people with ADHD have a real problem following a narrative and connecting text to any prior knowledge or anything that you've said previously. There's also a problem with kind of guessing at the meaning and any unknown words in the text, right? So jargon. 14.2 million people, is it, in the country, in the UK, have, I'll let my cat help me. Million people have a disability in this country, those are the people that are registered with it, by the way, not just people that control it and get through it and manage it. ADHD is one of those cognitive challenges where a lot of people for life will struggle through, and they will just carry on and they will get through it as best that they can. It's only now that we're really working out what it means to a lot of people. So if you've got a lot of content, one of the things that lots of people do is add lots of examples and kind of narratives through. But they expect you to remember, A, what was on the beginning of the page, or what your charity does specifically. And sometimes that's not the case. Now, I'm not saying you need to repeat everything on every page, because that won't work. But you need a really strong sense of information. You need to really know where your context markers are in the content. Now, your context markers can be your headings. It is so simple. Your headings should tell a story all the way down. So anybody who needs that context marker to jump back up to go, hold on, where is this? What is this going on? I'm not following this. They should be able to get the thread of what you're talking about by your headings alone. If you use a screen reader, you can kind of ask it to read out the headings first, and then it will jump to the top of the page and read the whole page out. People understand what you're trying to give them from just your headings. And the sorts of people that will help, anybody who's in a hurry. So for example, Luke Grabowski did a study with, what was it, 6,000 people? I could be lying there, you'll need to look it up. A lot of people, and he said that 90% of people are scrolling within 14 seconds. To be honest, I've never seen it that slow. People are scrolling within 3 or 4, but that I didn't do it with thousands of people, so we better take his research. People scroll down, have a look, jump back up. That's just anybody without a challenge. And by challenge, I don't just mean the neurodivergent ones. Perhaps they're on a bus. Perhaps they've got not a lot of Wi-Fi. One of the things that were happening, particularly in lockdown, is that people in poverty, their kids had to be online and they had 2 phones in the house, and they might have 3 children and all of their lessons were online. All the data went to the homework, nothing else. So there was no looking up and browsing for a lot of family. And that's all the time. That's not just through lockdown, but that's all the time that browsing is not a thing. Just meandering through content to see if they want to engage with you or not. They look at the headings, make a decision. Am I prepared to put my time, effort, and money into this? Back to ADHD. If auditory kind of processing is a bit of an issue, they can't sound out words. So again, people will go through, well, any jargon, anything that I want to introduce to a page, you kind of sound it out and work it out. Yeah, a lot of you will, but not everybody. And remember that skipping thing that we do with our eyes when we read. We don't read individual words, some do. Most people don't read individual words, they skip. And you don't take in information. It's called a saccade. When you saccade and you jump, you don't take in information. Your brain works it out for you and puts it in what he thinks is going on. So you can test it. If you go to a mirror and watch your eyes move, you'll only see your eyes when they stop, because your brain doesn't need to know what your eyes look like when they move. It takes in so much information in one go, and all the time, it decides what you need to remember and what you need to focus on. So just think about that. That's what your brain does normally when there are no challenges, no lesions, no distress, no pandemic, when you're just sitting there on your island with your butler and your mojito. Even then, when you have no stress whatsoever, that is what your brain is doing. Now add some stress to it. Now add ADHD. Now add ADHD that has not been diagnosed. Often when you have some inclusion or some accessibility requirements, you'll have more than one. A lot of people don't have just one thing and then that's it. So for example, in about 1/3 of ADHD cases, you will have dyslexia present as well. what will happen with dyslexia, of course, is that reading is just quite difficult in a variety of different ways. You really need to go into this kind of thing in detail to understand the full scope of it. But again, you put headings on a page, you are creating context markers. You have sentences that are between 15 and 24 words long. You're going to get them. It's going to be okay. Use active, not passive language, because passive, your brain has to remember what happened at the beginning of the sentence by the time it gets to the end of the sentence. Just take that away. You're not only helping those people who have ADHD or have whatever, you're helping everybody, because inclusive text doesn't just mean people that with an average education can look at and go, oh, those people over there. That's not a thing. That's just us waiting to happen. Disability is just waiting to happen, right? As you get older, you start losing your vision, for example, or you start losing some of your mobility, so you won't be able to scroll as easily. And if you've got a massive page with no headings and no context markers, you're going to lose people. So that was my opening summary. My questions for you are, what problems are you having, if any? If any of you have got the perfect organisation where everything that you say is just accepted, please drop that in the chat, because we all want to work for you. But if that's not you, what kind of questions do you have? And what kind of research would you like to see? Because we're actually looking at next year. The Readability Guidelines has been on furlough a bit recently. Next year, we're planning to do a whole load more research, anything that's currently missing. So I would like to hear from you what your stumbling blocks are. You're all just staring at the screen. You're right.
Hoping someone had stumbling blocks, or it would probably be weird that you've joined this call if everything's just really amazing.
Alistair, have you got a stumbling block or challenge, or are you just really happy to be here?
So, any questions then? Anything?
Oh, Alistair's unmuted. He's got his hand up.
Yep, and my hand's up. I'm all keen. So I think you mentioned this already, but I find the stumbling block really is getting buy-in at high levels for creating accessible content, because everybody signs up for it in theory, but when you tell them that their 15-point statement thing that they want to stick on the front page of your website, obviously I'm not speaking from direct experience in any way here, which is full of PhD level language. When you tell them that you can't put that on the front page of their website, you get knocked back. I don't know if I just wondered if you have any experience to share about how to kind of embed that kind of thinking at the highest levels of your organization, so that when you present that kind of argument to people, it doesn't just get battered down or ignored.
Yeah, it's the perennial problem, isn't it? So there's a couple of things. One, I always invite CEOs to user research. Have a look at this, and then I'll pick a page that I know is going to fail, or I have a good idea that it might not be ideal, and have them watch it. The next thing is journey mapping. So we invite everybody to journey mapping, marketing, comms, press team, everybody. And for those of you who don't know what journey mapping is, so we'll go through what the series of steps that the user goes through to get to a task. And we always step back. So we never start at Google, because you never start at Google. Humans don't start at Google. You have a 7 to 9 or 7 to 12 unconscious thoughts before you can have a conscious decision about anything. That comes from somewhere. It comes from language. It will influence your language. It will come with a whole load of emotion. It'll come whether they trust you or not, whether they want to engage with you or not. So you step back a bit, not loads, not like, when you were 4 and first had a cream egg or whatever, not that far back, but a bit, until you know what baggage these people are coming with. Then set out all the steps that people go through, not what the organisation wants them to go through, but all the steps your users will go through, and that needs to be steeped in research. Then we do empathy mapping and scoring and language mapping and user needs and acceptance criteria and all this sort of thing. But I invite everybody to do that with us, because I never need to say no to content. What I need to say is, where is it? So we know users are doing this here. We know this is the language that they're using. We know that these are the questions. We know that these are the user needs, because here's all the research. Off you go, read it. Yep. So if you want your massive PhD level thing, we know that they're not going to go through. Would you like them to read it or get engaged? What are your targets? You know, because some of this is knowing when to have the fight. So sometimes it's like, do all this and go, okay, fine. And you'll go back to your desk and you're like, have your head in your hands. But do it, track it, watch it fail. Go back to them and say, you had the KPIs or the goals or whatever it is that you wanted for this content. It failed. Yep. A/B testing, always brilliant. If you can get anybody to agree to it. So this is the thing you want. This is the thing we want. Let's put them both up. Always a plus, but very hard to get people to agree to that. If it's hard to get people to agree to that, it's because they know somewhere they might not come out on top good. That's where the conversation opens. It's like, why don't you want to do it? Well, it'll be a waste of time. It's a waste of money. Yeah, but we'll learn this and we'll be able to put it over here and all of these things. Why? Have other people in the room, because that why question generally brings up in other people's minds, hold on a minute, why? And so you can start to have that conversation. What I would say is that there are some people that you will never ever sway. You need to take a decision about how much mental energy you're going to put in there and how important it is. So for example, Deputy Prime Minister wanted some utter shite on the site a few years ago. We're talking 10, 12 years ago. Like, no, you can have that if you like. And I put it on the homepage because only 7% of people went to the homepage, so nobody saw it. There are ways around these things. But generally what I would say is that the industry right now, my experience is that people are at least open to the challenge. If you put it towards them as, this is what everybody is doing. Shall we try and get to them? What are the KPIs? What are the goals? Let's try. So however that might be my bubble. People only talk to me when they're prepared to let me have a go. Does any?
That's really helpful. Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah. That was really useful. I thought it was a really interesting, like that point about 7% of people visit the homepage. And I think like when you're talking about decisions at a senior level, they see the homepage as the website and everything else is like some secondary content that nobody goes to. And actually that, you know, a simple statistic like that of getting them to understand the value of content. It actually reminds me of like a charity that I worked with last year who had a site built by an agency and just like zero thought at all about content. And literally the agency built them a homepage and they were like, what about content pages internally? And they were like, oh, well, that's not spec. So you'd have to like come back to us and give us X amount £1,000 to build those out, as if like the homepage is the entire website and everything else is just some secondary fluff that someone might visit at some point. But that's not an entirely unnormal thing.
No.
And I think if more people at a senior level could understand that the homepage is, it's not that it's irrelevant, but like in terms of the relevance of your overall site, where does it actually sit? And often it's really, really far down that pecking order. And just that simple stat might be enough to start that conversation with people. Yeah. Suzanne had a really good question asking about good research we can share on why adding documents to sites is not the best for accessibility. So that's probably a common one for lots of you, I'd imagine.
You're going to hear me say this a lot, and I know that a lot of charities can't afford user researchers, and I get that. There are a lot of researchers out there looking for side hustles for their passion projects. So if you need somebody to give you a hand, I would give it a go. But again, user researchers are the ones that will help you. You can, so there are a number of like stats and metrics that you can get hold of. How many people open and don't engage? How many people can't open? Ask the question on your site, do you want this in another format? See if anybody engages with that. Jerry McGovern has done some work on worldwide waste. Have you heard of this? For any charities that are particularly into any kind of environmental or climate change things, just shoving stuff up doesn't work, and particularly in documents rather than HTML pages. So have a look at his work. The only other way that I find works every time is videos of research of people failing, going, I can't get to this, I can't get to this, and being able to go and say, you know, this is enshrined in law now that your stuff needs to be accessible. And if you take a look at Domino's being taken, I mean, this is in the States, but Domino's being taken to court because their site wasn't accessible. HRA was taken to court, so British government were taken to court by a pharmaceutical company called Richmond. Their site was perfectly legally correct. It had been signed off by legal, but a High Court judge declared it unlawful because it was confusing and there was too much on there. So there is a precedent set in this country. So we are moving towards a place where it is enshrined in law. You will find usability evidence out there and in there. But because it's subjective of what is too much, I would probably look at the person that you're arguing with and what they want. So if they're like, well, we're going to put a PDF up because it's easy for us. It's like, how many visits do you want per month? Track it and go, well, you didn't get it, but if it was in HTML, you would have all these people, and get your stats out. I mean, this is the way that I work, by the way. I love a stat, so it's up to you. But I'll say, you know, 14.9 million people. We got X million people who are, we know, have ADHD, have dyslexia, have autism, have whatever, and they can't get into this. This is proprietary software. X% of the country doesn't have that. So when I have arguments like that, it's more like, this is for you because it's easy for you, but what do you want out of it? Because you're killing the planet, you're taking a lot of time up, and you're not getting to your goals. So when we do content strategy sessions, also we'll do that journey mapping, and then we'll base it against what the organization wants to happen versus what is actually happening. And don't have any judgment about it. Just do it and go, should we see the gaps there? Once you've done that, do value mapping. So we work out exactly how much it costs to get content up. And then we balance that with what the goals are and is it worth it? Because if you've got somebody pumping 250 PDFs up that only 4 people per year look at, you might as well email it to them. You might as well get their email addresses from them and mail it, because it's going to cost you quite a bit. So I've been doing value mapping for years now in this country. It averages out about £2,500, £2,500 per piece of information for an organisation of any real size. If you hit legal or government, or particularly if you run into anything with finance and insurance, that can top 8,000 to 8,500 per piece of information. So if you're putting that kind of time and money and effort, because in the value mapping, you work out how much time it takes as well. So everything is in the workflow and governance sphere. You know, when you have to have 43 people sign everything off, not sure if that's ever been your experience. Work out actually how much time that takes and how much money that is, because all of those people need to be paid to do that. And then just add it all up and say, right, you want all this, only these people are looking at it at this time, this is the drop-off rate, this is how much it costs, this is what we're not doing. That's the other thing that I find that content teams don't do very much, is display how much work you're doing. Most of you are working your butts off constantly, all the time. You always go above and beyond and nobody sees it. Make it open. Blue and great matrix on the wall or on Miro or wherever it is that you do it, all the stuff that's going on, and say, I can put this in, what else shall we drop? And make it not your decision, somebody else's. So once you put all of those things together, you should start to have decent conversations about why shoving stuff up is not a good idea. If that doesn't work, which it won't for some people, find out what they care about and who they listen to, and see if you can nobble them. If it's the CEO that they want something, again, decide how much effort you're going to put into it and what it's worth for you. Does that answer the question enough?
Answered it for me, but I'm just let's see if is it Suzanne that asked the question. Are you about, Suzanne? Did that answer your question? Oh, she said that's great in the chat box. Excellent. Okay. Sorrel's got a question. Do you want to? You can unmute as well. Actually, come on. It saves me just in the go-between. Do you want to come on, Sorrel?
Hi. Rosie, great. Thanks, Sarah. Just a quick question about easy read content. So, and looking at, it seems to be it's always a bolt-on or an add-on to existing content, and just thinking about, are people doing this really well, where it's a much more blended approach, or just going all easy read from the start and being ambitious with that? It seems that it's an area that's a little bit, I don't find examples of people doing that really, really well.
Yeah, easy read is great. Easy read is great. You can do a lot with complex terms and getting it straight down to easy read. What I would say though is that often easy read users are supported. So if they have any questions, they normally have a human to ask those to. Now, a lot of people on the internet who have perfect reading abilities do not have somebody who is supportive. So any nuances that are, I don't want to say lost or missed out, because a lot of the easy read stuff I'm seeing is great, but do you know what I mean? There's often questions kind of off the back of it. So again, know what your audience is like. Also, what I would say is, if you use the user's language, you keep your sentences short, you use low punctuation, explain the terms the first time you use them on the page, add graphics and space. Graphics that are useful, by the way, not eye candy, they just add to page load. Graphics that are actually useful. All of those things will help every audience. But like I say, if you have serious cognitive challenges, then you normally have support. So you just need to weigh up, you know, your audience and where do you want to go. I would certainly like to see a lot more. I would like to see T's and C's in easy read. I haven't yet found an organisation that will let me do it. If that's you, get in touch. But yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
There's some really good links being put in by people in the chat as well, Sorrel, to go and explore. So it's worth going and have a look at those.
Brilliant, will do. Thank you.
Cool. Vicky Chapman, who's on the call, has also tweeted to say she's bought your book, Sarah. So there you go.
Hey, thank you.
I don't know if I get commission per sale. That's maybe something we can negotiate afterwards.
I'll send you a cup.
Like 10, a cup would be nice. Actually, I'll take a cup. That'd work. Cool. Right. Any other questions from people? Hugh, I think you maybe had one.
Yeah. Can I jump in with some cheeky advice? Firstly, buy Sarah's book. Both books, actually. Really, really good. When I was working in insurance, one thing we used to get was people coming and saying, "Can you put this on the website?" And basically, the question you need to ask them is, what are you trying to achieve? What's the problem you're trying to solve? And 9 times out of 10, the web was just seen as the path of least resistance. There'd be some regulation that says you've got to make this content publicly available, or you have to notify people about something, and the website was the path of least resistance. So, for example, with insurance, I'm going to have to bore you with this, but if you buy your insurance, say, in 1 year, and you keep renewing it, you're on the same deal. And then a couple of years down the line, they change the terms and the conditions, and you become what's called a legacy customer because you've got a legacy policy. Now, somebody came to us saying, "Can you put this document about legacy policyholders up on the website because the terms and conditions have changed?" So I said, well, okay, our current website is about getting new customers in. If you look at our website, it's all about new customers, come to us, let us insure your car. And I suggested, do you know the names and addresses of all these legacy customers? And he said, yes. I said, well, why don't you send a letter to them saying the terms and conditions have changed? And they said, have you tried getting a sign off for a new letter? It's easier if you just put it on the website. I sent him away and said, go and do the hard thing, because you won't actually achieve what you want. So having those sort of conversations can actually work really well.
Yeah, I agree completely. Do you all have that? It's like, oh, digital, because it's easy, because it's cheap. And it does cost. If you read Jerry McGovern's book, I promise you, your jaw will be on the floor. It does cost. And like he was saying, you know, a lot of people would just go, well, digital, they will come. No, they won't. Have you got, you know, poverty is an access need in this country. And it is a serious access need in this country. And so people don't browse around and they don't spend a whole time looking at stuff because they have to pay for their data. Now, most people working in digital go, hold on a minute, what, pay for your data? Because it's just something that we do, right? It's like your water or your electricity, but it's not like that for everybody. So knowing where your audience is, as Hugh was saying, you know where your audience live, you know who's got the thing, who's got the policy, put it in front of their faces, make it inclusive, make it accessible, and then you will hit your goals. He's quite right. Without knowing what your goals are, I don't think, personally, unless you know what your goals are, I don't think anybody should be publishing anything. But I think that's a bit unicorn. But yes, you're quite right, Hugh, quite right.
Thanks, Hugh. Right, James is going to jump in with a question, and then we've got time for some more as well. James, do you want to ask yours? Maybe James is away getting a coffee.
I saw that with tea, so I could dub it for him if we want. It was about, if you've got a big backlog of stuff that needs a content revision or a redesign, how do you get through it if you've got a limited team? So I guess it's prioritization.
It depends on your organization, is what I would say. So the first one is, of course, what is your highest traffic stuff? What is the thing that your users are really coming to you for? And again, balance that with your content strategy of what are your digital goals, your organizational goals, digital goals, content goals, because those should be in your content strategy. So that's one way of doing it. What I would also say, particularly if you're having issues with your organization, choose stuff that you can use, that you can show the difference to. So benchmark something, then go and find whatever it is that you think is going to make the most kind of splash internally and work on that first. It sounds a bit mercenary, but what happens is that you then get traction to be able to maybe hire some more people or to be able to get rid of a lot more content. Personally, I would love to see a limit on what everybody can publish, because then you know, if you knew that you as an organization could only publish 200 pages, can you imagine? Your comms would get very, very precise, very, very quickly. Never going to happen. But again, if you add everything up and what you're putting into it, then that should prioritize in terms of how much it takes you, what are you expecting to get back for it, as Hugh was saying, if you know what you want out of it. But you can have an internal goal as well as an external one, particularly if you're starting out in this or you're just getting nowhere and you've been getting nowhere for years with where you're doing. Choose something that is relevant and useful to you and balance those two up. So you want to do it for your users, of course you do, but you've got to keep your eyes on the prize, which is ultimately a whole website that works for your audience. So work out what happens, what's best for you, I would say.
Sarah. Hey, there's a really interesting one actually. Emma, do you want to come on and ask yours? That's probably one that's going to be useful to a lot of people in terms of the answer. Oh, you're not muted, but we can't hear you. I don't know what's going on. Oh no. Do you want me to ask on your behalf? Yeah, definitely can't hear you. Yeah, it's not just me, I don't think. Everyone else is looking puzzled as well. That's good. Okay, that's fine. Emma's question was, do you have any advice for what to do when someone's made a non-user-centric decision to change the name of something that your users are already familiar with.
Let me tell you a little story. I love stories. I got loads of them. We worked on a service, this is years ago, multi-million-pound service. And the first page had 3 questions of them. One of them was, what's your name, right? So it's got 3 questions on. And this page, we had an argument about one of the questions and went into testing, and it had a 100% failure rate. And it was because the question was, what's your NIN? Now, NIN stands for National Insurance Number. And most people know it from their national insurance number. A lot of people will know it from your NI number, but not nearly enough. The government department in question, that will remain nameless, wanted everybody to learn the language NIN, because that's what they used in the back office. It was 100% failure rate. All we did was change one word, NIN, to national insurance number, and it went from 100% failure rate on page 1 to an 86% completion rate through the whole tool. Now, you've probably got things that are similar in your organisation, like those words, those jargon. They want a humorous, title for a service that means nothing. Employ Google Trends to show that nobody's going to find this thing because nobody will be able to get through it. So, a lot of people are very into search engine optimization, SEO. And so there's that. Also, if you can, then eye tracking and watch people go back and do regressive reads. 10 to 15% of all reading is regressive reading anyway. But if you get like people spending more than 3-4 milliseconds on a whole title, there's something wrong and you will lose people. And then it's just engagement. You've also got people who will remain nameless coming up with amazing titles and names for services and sentences for terms to explain programs, which are, I don't know how to do this professionally, which are similar. They're just similar to other brands and other things. What happens is you're not going to come up in search, because those other brands and those other things are bigger than you are. And so doing this kind of play on words, you better make sure you got all the Google juice, because otherwise it's not happening for you. So you have, again, this is all stats, metrics, research, to be able to have those arguments, because you can show failure. And you can actually show failure as easily as you can success if the thing is up. If the thing is not up, again, there are no new ideas. So there will be something similar out there that you can usually prove the case for. The other things that we recommend is, so you've got Google Trends, but also go into forums, go into social media. If you're in forums, don't use the ones with passwords that ask you to log in, because there's a kind of privacy issue thing going on there, but the open ones, and social media, and just look at the terms that are being used and all the ones that could be used and which ones are the highest, because what you're actually doing is seeing vocabulary, and you're seeing vocabulary change as well over the years. If I said to you in the 50s, I need your D62, you'd know what I was talking about. Most of you will not have any idea now, right? It's your logbook for your car. So it changes, and being able to get your organisation to understand that that language changes as well, and that they need to keep on top of it based on data, should make your conversations a bit easier. Does that answer the question? I do tend to go off on my soapbox a bit, so sorry.
I like it. Yeah, some really good advice. I particularly like, I always, because I'm a cyclist, and always moan at people how road tax hasn't been a thing since 1937. But still, if you type in pay your road tax, it'll still take you to the right page in the government's website.
Yep.
So, yeah. Yep. Okay. There was a question about, we've maybe covered the kind of, I guess, general consensus of this, but I think Tarek's got a really good question that's specifically about PDF downloads as opposed to the information directly on the website, and like what is the best practice and what should be done.
Right, soapbox out again then. Right, PDFs. Oh, t-shirt with no PDFs on. One, you have to have space to download a PDF, right? Two, you can't change it. So if you change your settings for whatever reason, be it accessibility, kind of inclusion type things, or because you just want your computer set up in a different way, can't do that with most PDFs. You can actually make PDFs accessible. I would say, and I'm going to throw a stat at you that's completely out there, 99% of people and organizations do not know how to make their PDFs completely accessible. They're also no good on your phone. Have you tried? You're scrolling left, right, up, down. Where's the field? Can I get into this? What the hell is this? You've also got the bandwidth issue. So if you are going into a tunnel or whatever, your PDF could be gone before it's downloaded. You've got poverty. You know, you're taking somebody's data to download that, whereas HTML is a lot cheaper for them. So there's just a whole host of arguments about why not to use a PDF. A lot of people will say, I need one so that people can print it out appropriately. Then get your print style sheet sorted out. Because all you need to do is get a design. I say that, all you need to do, you need to pay one, pay a designer, so that when somebody hits Control P and they print that page out, it prints out very well. So when I was working for Citizens Advice, we actually had a page that had advice for what you needed to do to take for an interview. And we knew that people printed out this page to take with them, so that, and they would annotate it and kind of write all over it the things that they needed to remember, because we knew this because of research. So what we actually played with was, when you hit print, it truncated the information and printed lines on it underneath. And the success metric was how many people turned up to a bureau with that printed out, because we gave them the space to do so. So I really struggle with PDFs. Another argument will be people, particularly academics, if you work for a charity that has a lobbying or research function, it'll be academics are used to PDFs. Yes, they are. But you know what? If they hit Control P in HTML, or they hit Control P in a PDF, so long as your print style sheet is sorted out, they will not complain at you. Soapbox away.
Brilliant, thank you, Sarah. John, any others that have been jumping out question-wise? There's loads of stuff been coming through the chat.
We've got one from Karis about multi-regional audiences. Karis, I don't know if you wanted to ask that out loud or just have me pass it on for you.
Yeah, so I work for a UK-wide charity, and we do debt advice, which is a devolved issue. So there are different routes out of debt in the different nations, and we have audiences in all the different nations. And that gets quite complex in terms of how to manage that from a context perspective, and particularly in my role in kind of helping to educate people in head office who are based in England that things are different in Scotland, and how best to manage those conversations, but also how best to manage our content so that it is accessible and understandable for people from the different nations as well.
The easiest way for that is to just get rid of the irrelevant people. Irrelevant, that's awful, you know what I mean? The people, this is going on the internet and everything, isn't it? The people who would not be appropriate for is what I should have said. So for example, I've seen it been done a load of different ways from a design perspective, particularly the progressive reveals, you know, what they called accordions. So you can have for England, for Wales, for Scotland, and then you only get the information that is right for you. Some have buttons across, where are you from, bink, and take you to the tailored one. Some do clever things and they'll base it on your IP address. The thing that obviously that can fall down is like if you're, for example, in a pandemic and you've gone home to your parents and they're in another administration and they're just looking it up, then they won't realise that they're in the wrong bit. So there's that as a tech consideration. I would definitely split it up. And it's a really simple thing to do with design. So GovUK has got some examples. It's completely gone off my head what we've got or what we had. Citizens Advice also do it. or did. So maybe have a look at there for their design treatments.
Brilliant, thank you. That answer your question, Kath? Okay. Anyone else want to jump in? We've still got a bit of time. We've got about 5 minutes before we need to finish up, so there's still time for a couple more questions.
I'm going to ask a quick one before we go back to the chat box, which is, I like, Sarah, what you're saying about sometimes just swerving around the issue. So, you know, finding a way that kind of didn't involve a protracted slog. But I wondered how do you decide when to swerve and just kind of meet the user need, but kind of ignoring the mistaken belief amongst your team? And when do you decide, right, this is a hill we need to die on, we need to kind of thrash this out with data and kind of get some common understanding?
My teams always have a do and don't die of a list, always.
Okay.
And so
has it got good clear headings in it?
Yeah. I will die over that hill. Links that actually work and tell people where they're going, I will die on that hill as well. FAQs, I will die on that hill. So there's quite a few that I will die on. In terms of the organisation, I would probably take a look at your maturity, and there are a number of models out there now, and work out where it is that you are. When we do like road mapping sessions, so what are we hoping to achieve this year? So when we do content strategy sessions, we work out the organisational goals, digital goals, content goals. Then we'll work out what we're doing for the year and what we want to achieve. Everything has a KPI. Every single little thing has a success metric attached to it. Once we've got that, we've been having the conversations with every level, and stuff will start to come out, and the prioritization will come out, and vanity will come out, and fears will come out. And then you have to decide, what are we going to do with it? And then I put a separate track, which is what we're going to do internally. So you've got what you are doing for the year, who's doing it, and then what the internal comms is. And I'll do that for a year as well. And it will be all open, and it's all a roadmap, because I think bringing the organisation along with you, particularly up front when you're doing your discoveries and you're going out and you're getting your data and you're getting your evidence in the first place, that will save you a whole bunch of time later on. And really be very picky with who you choose to start working with. Choose people who you know are friendly to you. Not because you want a nice working atmosphere, but because you need to start creating that corpus of data for you. So again, if you can choose something that is very important to the business, and it doesn't need to be important for the user, that's the thing. So if your top thing is to get donations in, leave it alone. If for the organisation is hell bent on getting their blog posts up and running because nobody's reading them, choose that. And then work on these people, go and have learning lunch thing with them, go and have tea. The thing that I find, and particularly at the moment, it can be very difficult, but just having a cup of tea with someone, you can do it virtually, understanding what their fears are, genuinely what their fears are, without judgment on your part, can get you a lot further later on. When I was at government, I spent half my time in the British Museum members room. One, directors of comms wouldn't shout at me there because they would shout at me in meeting rooms. And two, it makes people relax and go, this person opposite me is a human. Because often with content, we know what we shouldn't be doing. We know, because it's our sphere. And trying to explain that, you become a role. You become a blocker. You become a gatekeeper. You need to take that away and connect human to human. So there are several different strands that you need to pull together, and it can be very wobbly at the beginning. But once you've got that, all you need usually is a few people in the organisation to start talking for you. You will find your job easier. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you. Thanks very much. Ross, do we have time for Vicky's question, which I think has got a short answer and a long answer. That was a question about downloading HTML. So Vicky, to help us understand your question a bit more, is it the case that you take versions of government information, add some commentary and context? Is that right?
Yes, so what I would normally do is, in order for me to try and digest the information rather than printing off the PDF, I would use the electronic version and highlight important sections. So I'm not having to take notes separately as well. But I've noticed there's been a change recently where they're now not offering PDF documents on the website, which I can totally understand. But it just means it kind of makes it more difficult, I suppose, for us to read it. Like, you know, if you don't have time to read a whopping big 137-page document or whatever, and you can't go back to it. So I just wondered if there was a way around that, because I know certainly my boss wouldn't have time to do that. And I'm just thinking, you know, I don't know if we're the only ones who might be in that position, but I thought I'd ask the question.
Interesting. I don't know. When I do it, I just Control A, Control C, Control V into a Google Doc and play around with the formatting there. Does anybody have a more tech solution than that?
I guess a quicker way is print to PDF. If what you're used to is annotating PDFs, that would give you that kind of fixed in time version.
That's true.
Oh, and Nora's just put a thank you for today. It's been good and inspiring to hear from Sarah. She knows to go. Oh, thank you, Nora. I think we might have to finish up time-wise, but it's worth saying as well that we will have the video of this on the SCVO YouTube channel. There's quite a few people got in touch with me who couldn't make the time, but who wanted to watch afterwards. So if you've got any colleagues, and actually, I think Alistair's point about how do we get buy-in, like, you know, being able to just send the recording to someone in a senior management team and saying, go and watch this, take an hour out of your diary and go and watch this, and just, we've covered a lot of the core principles that they should be thinking about today. Even if they're not going to go away and read Sarah's book, or they're not going to go away and get any in-depth training, this could be a really good starting point for some of them. Any final thoughts from you, John, Beth, or Maddie?
I thought it was a really wonderful talk, so thanks, Sarah, for joining us. And I think it was, for me, I think the point about having theoretically infinite space is such a problem with digital that we will face. You know, there's always a bit more room in the website, so that's a really good battle to go back and have. And then also the fact that you need to be doing it all the time as well. It's not a kind of do some content work once and then forget about it for a bit. So yeah.
You see a success as I publish something, but you have to maintain that, otherwise it could end up on the front page of the Daily Mail. So
yeah, wonderful. One thing I just wanted to do before everybody rushes off for their next meetings is our next DigiShift will be at the end of September, so last morning and the last Wednesday of the month again, and we'll have Leslie Pinder who'll be talking about supporter experience in the digital realm for us. There'll be more details on our website when that goes live in the next few days, or a little bit longer than that. But thanks very much indeed, Sarah, for joining us, and thanks everyone for the great question.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.